USA won Wales. The USA, probably the better team in the first half, JJ. Oh, why were they so good?
I think there's a few tactical reasons and a lot of character reasons as well. They seemed really up for it, USA. They were going for tackles very quickly and aggressively, and Wales did not like it. So the team shape, I'm not sure how much the team shape kind of helped, but basically Bale hardly got the ball, and Wales' problem was that they had a lot of depth between the three centre-backs and the boys who are high up the pitch. And what USA were doing, were pressing with like a front three. So they had this front three of Timothy Weah, Josh Sargent and Christian Pulisic. Then they had a three of McKennie, Adams and Musa behind them here. And the fullbacks, who are meant to be the most important part of the team, obviously at fullback positions. And basically the Wales front three, or Wilson was more in line with the midfield actually, it was more like this. They just couldn't get the forwards into the game. James wasn't making runs into channels like he was supposed to. Bale just didn't do anything. And then what you had was that USA were able to get the ball through to the wide areas by doubling up. So they'd have maybe Pulisic would pull out wide with McKennie, and you'd have Anthony Robertson would be slightly further back, but they'd have loads of double ups on the wide areas. So the ball would always be, they always be able to play it, and they were able to drag Wales out of position. And then Wales couldn't keep it. So they had so much depth between them that when they hit the ball up to the top, it just came straight back to them. And USA were combining really well, lots of rotations that you get McKennie and Pulisic. Pulisic would be coming inside the pitch. And the goal was a really cleverly worked, where they were slightly deeper. We'll push them right much deeper. I'm playing with the board if you're listening to this on the podcast. Do come and watch the live streams. And so what they managed to do, because Weah scores the goal, Timothy Weah, son of George, he manages to score the goal. But they basically push the ball forward and then follow it in. So someone will drop, which will drag a player with them. I think we'll probably push the midfield a bit further up, like this. So they play the ball forward quickly, and then someone will drop in. So Pulisic might drop. That drags maybe a wing back or a full centre back out with him. And then maybe that goes to Sargent. And then as he does that, someone else will come forward, which maybe drags someone else to try and start dealing with him. And that leaves space in behind for someone else to get in. So there's lots of rotations and movement. But basically the right winger for USA scores the goal in the centre forward's position with Pulisic running across him. So you had lots of clever movement and lots of rotations, but it was about the energy and the attacking impetus that they had, I think, pushing forward.
What were you so impressed with in the first half, Seb?
The technical level. So in previous tournaments, I feel like the USA has emerged in a kind of a state of sort of existential crisis where they're worried about partially worried about their own performance, partially worried about how they're perceived. I think also because that describes a pretty negative attitude towards US soccer from outside. And this time, I remember thinking, and I hope this doesn't sound patronizing because it's not how I intend it to be. It was just, this is just a good side. This is just a good side full of good players who are sure of themselves. And I think part of that comes from, well, it's not a coincidence that they're playing at a high level. And some of the individual players here have established themselves and their own reputation in Europe. MLS has risen, the standard of MLS has risen exponentially over the last decade, definitely. But it's still beneficial to have these players in crucial spots across Europe. And I just thought, I was a little bit surprised too, because I looked at players like Sergiño Dest, who hasn't played a lot of football, played to a really high level. I thought Josh Sargent hasn't had the best time at Norwich, a little bit... a bit easier in the Championship, of course, and that makes a difference. But then, and also Christian Pulisic is, his Chelsea career is a little nebulous. I mean, I'm not sure where it's headed at this point, but you saw them all at their very, very best. Full 45 minutes. I mean, obviously, I'm going to talk about the Welsh comeback after half time. But yeah, just a strong side. And I remember thinking at half time, I'm not looking forward to England playing this side. That's probably the first time, and this might be English arrogance, I'm sure it is, but it's probably the first time I thought... Yes, definitely. It's probably the first time I thought that about the US in the tournament. Not that you take them lightly, but you think, well, I think England, an England side playing well can cope with this team and, can match up really well with them. Whereas this side, buzzing around with energy. JJ's talked about some of the rotations and some of the combinations in high areas. The England defence is going to struggle with that if they replicate what they did in the first 45 minutes.
I think that's true. Before we talk about the second half, I just want to talk about the growth of the sport in the States. We either have a video coming out about that or it has already come out. But there's some interesting stuff in that. And I think the reason I bring that up is because, you described this team as like a good team that fits where they are now. Presumably they're just going to get better, aren't they?
You'd think so. So I don't want to steal the video's thunder because it is yet to come out. But it's a great sport in the US, and for a variety of different reasons. Obviously, the percentage of the Hispanic population who consider themselves fans of the game, that element within the US population is growing faster than any other part of the US population. Also, and I spoke to the Athletics' Paul Tenorio for this, he talked about how dramatically improved the presentation and availability of soccer is in America. So that includes things like, your choice of Premier League games, the broadcasting standard of them, and it's kind of night and day compared to certainly what Paul was used to as when he was growing up, when he was sort of a teenager in the 90s, and he would have to make do with a couple of Champions League games a week. And then he told me that he was a big Francesco Totti fan growing up, and his access to Serie A came through pay-per-view games that he'd have to spend $20 on, and so like all of these factors, and there's many more that I haven't covered, and that the video will do a good job of explaining. But yeah, you could say that it's the fastest growing team sport in the US, and the quality seems to get higher every World Cup that they appear in. I know they missed out in 2018, but you know what I'm saying. It's just it's no longer. I think that's the best way of putting it. The US player is no longer a novelty in Europe. Like, you're just a good footballer. I felt like Landon Donovan was a very good footballer, but I think people said, before that, and before they appreciated his goal scoring and his teamwork and his tremendous work rate, they say, oh, he's American. And that was terribly unfair. And now, like, there's a little bit of that, but now you just assess these players on their merits fairly. And that's really, really important. And that's kind of a real symptom of change, I think, over the last few decades.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, at half-time in this game, JJ, Dan James came off.
Yes.
And Kiefer Moore came on. And that's a sort of small and fast man on for a very large man.
A big, nasty man.
That changed the game.
He's a big lad. It did. Kiefer Moore coming on did definitely change the game. And there's a couple of things that apart from Moore coming on that made it a big difference. So he was obviously a huge difference, literally huge, because he's massive. And so he was able to be at the top here, so you could put the ball into him. And he's very good at just holding it, shielding it, being able to block off defenders.
Yeah.
So then he could hold it here, and then you could get to bring players into play. So you could bring Ramsey in, you could bring Kyle Roberts into play. That's some of the things you could do. But he was also moving the channels much better than what Dan James was doing. So then he could be a wide kind of guy that could keep the ball, a wide guy. So he can keep the ball in wide areas to, again, allow teammates to come in and combine with him and take Wales up the pitch because they couldn't get out of their own half.
Can I ask a question then?
Yes.
It's like, it seems kind of obvious that he would do that. Maybe not the second part, but that he's bigger and taller and can hold the ball up, right? That seems like an obvious thing that a casual, I'm not denigrating your analysis, but that seems like an obvious thing that a casual fan could pick up. Why didn't he start? I don't understand.
Well, I think the reason they didn't start is because when you played Dan James, so you know the way the USA are going to play. Both teams basically had done research on each other and knew exactly how they're going to play. And I can show you what the USA do in a second. But when you have Bale, James, and say, what was the other one? Wilson, put him up top. Maybe, and you've got a midfield two, it means that you've got these fast lads who can, it's the wrong way around actually, put him there like this. So these can all get in behind a high line because USA like to play aggressive football and they like to play quite a high line. They like to push into the other half so they can then combine with this narrow front three. See how this looks? Well, on the board I've got the front, the 4-3-3 looks very narrow, and it was for a lot of the time. But then if you play a high line, it means that you have players like Dan James or Gareth Bale or Harry Wilson who can run in behind. And so you've got an option when the USA squeeze you can then recoil and spring out the back.
Yeah.
Then you've got pace. You've also got pace from players like Nico Williams and Kyle Roberts. And then maybe Ramsey joins in at certain times, box to box, to join in. But what USA were doing, as well as that, rather than having Kiefer Moore there, so it's about chance creation, right? Mm-hmm. It's still in Wales actually, so it's about chance creation and how you want to create your chances, probably by springing attacks against a backline which isn't very fast. Tim Ream and Walker Zimmerman, that's his name, isn't it? They're not especially rapid, and you saw the huge error Zimmerman made in the box to take down Bale, right? So you know you can probably play against these guys. You also know for sure that Dest and Robinson are going to get forward. They're going to do that because they were underlapping quite a lot as well, but you know that's what's going to happen. So look where you get your space. Loads of space in here to be able to attack against the high lines. It makes perfect sense. Whereas for Wales, what USA knew they would do is need their width from these wing backs. So Nico Williams and Kyle Roberts getting forward. But they were kept real pinned back all the time by this narrow front three. And Pulisic would look, and Weah would want to get in behind the space left by these fullbacks or wingbacks getting out the pitch either side of the centre backs. So what they did in the second half was they kept Ampadu more of the kind of like anchor, we'll call him, like a 6 more close to these guys here.
Yeah.
And then that meant that they could play basically Williams on one side, Roberts on the other, and then you could have Ramsey and Wilson and get rid of James. You can go away and put Moore in, and then you've basically got that 2 with the 2 wide players next to them in a row. So you've got a different change of shape, which then forces USA to come back a little bit more to try and defend, which then changes the way they play.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic brings you the best sports journalism in the world in a personalised experience, connecting you with the stories and teams that you care about the most. There's coverage of 13 sports, plus direct access to world-class journalists through live Q&As, discussions and podcasts. And you can try it now for free for 30 days by clicking the link in the description.